Over the last 20 years, I've kind of observed there's kind of like three takes on how I see and hear people talk about agile transformation. The first take is the idea of like a practices-based transformation. In a practices-based transformation, it's like we use Scrum, we hire Scrum Masters, we get a coach, teach people how to do sprint planning, daily stand-ups, reviews, retrospectives. Maybe you have XP coaches and it's test-driven development and pair programming. You think about how Scrum talks about it. If I have a Scrum Master, their job is to remove the impediments, right? But what if the impediments are a 40-year-old mainframe engine that does thousands of ACH transactions a second? That's a pretty big impediment to remove, right? What if the impediment is siloed org structures and things like that? What if the impediment is I have a 3-month release management cycle and I can't deploy anything into production? Like if you go down to practices first, like sometimes it works, right? Small organizations or teams within larger organizations, you can get that to work. But in these corporate monoliths that we're working in, really, really tough, right? Like anybody who's doing a Scrum Master job, really, really hard job. It's like the next gen of project management because you're betting on the fact that if we start to do these things and the impediments show themselves, that we can remove the impediments. And sometimes the impediments are harder to remove than doing Scrum in a funky way, right? It's easier to change Scrum than it is to change the impediments in the organization, right? So I think that's why a lot of practices first transformations fail. And so in a culture first transformation, it's kind of like where I started. If we just get everybody to think the right way and to have the right mindset, the magic will happen, right? We'll get everybody to think and be agile and do agile and everything will be great. I don't know about you guys, I've never seen that kind of a transformation work either. Right? Because there's so many diverse interests in a company and so many different priorities, and you bounce up against corporate governance, you bounce up against architectural standards, all kinds of different things that make a culture first transformation really, really tough. So we took this approach that we call like systems first. And so what a system means to me is how do we get encapsulated teams? How do we get a team-based organizational strategy? When there's dependencies between teams, like how are we going to deal with them? How are we going to orchestrate dependencies across teams? How are we going to subordinate that up to some sort of enterprise level prioritization? How are we going to measure it? How are we going to control it? Like how are we going to make sure that the system is producing the things that we want? If you start with the systems, right, you understand your dependencies, you understand your teaming strategies, and you can do that in a more holistic way across the organization, you can enable the system with really solid practices, and then you create a space for culture to emerge. When people see an incremental and iterative development approach start to work, they can start to suspend disbelief and start to trust it.